for your message, a Franciscan message. St. Francis called for a life of simplicity. And thank you so much for your observations and for the brevity of your interventions.
Thank you.
Let me say that in regards to the family and family planning, the data are overwhelming. Literacy is now causally a proven vector for smaller families, for better health, for better individual and social mobility. Thank you. Professor Rabin.
First of all, I'd like to say the obvious thing that Professor Lee has contributed an enormous amount to our thinking about these problems during his very wonderful career, and his modesty is very appealing, and immodesty is not appealing, but thank you for all that you've done and for your friendship. And I would like to repeat more or less my message of yesterday, which is that I believe that these worthy objectives will be attained only by building our moral and ethical connections around the world. I don't think that people are ever going to be convinced by putting up sheets of paper with fine mathematical calculations on them and demanding that they change their minds for mechanical reasons because the world is warming or something else. I think if you depend entirely on mechanical reasons, on hard physical arguments, on badgering people who you think are doing something wrong, that you'll never get there. I think more or less those people are in the position of the people in the boat that you showed at the end of your lecture. And I think that if we develop a charity and a love for one another and a feeling of the world as a united kind of vessel which houses us all in interaction with all the people in the world and all the living organisms in the world, that we might have a chance. And that is why I'm so happy that we're meeting here in the Vatican, in a place of love and charity, and one which I believe very strongly we need to develop if we ever want to see a solution to these problems. I think it will never be a graphic and mechanical one.
Professor Lee, would you like to respond, or would you like to take more questions?
Well, I agree with what you said. On the other hand, it is very interesting. I'm serving as the so-called policy advisor for the president now. So I can see president and a smart lady who got her PhD from London School of Economics and very brilliant. So I can talk to her about global warming, everything. She can understand everything. But she has many priorities, bringing jobs to the young people and improve the economy. So I often have to do the other thing. For example, in March, after I talked to her, the next day there will be a parade or demonstration against air pollution. So I went there, joined the parade, joined the demonstration. She was shocked. She was shocked. She asked Vice President, how come Yuan Li is there? That gave her a great impact, and she started to change air pollution, tackle the air pollution problem much more seriously. So I do believe in the people. I do believe in the communication, but backing up the people is very important. This trip, I came out, before I left, my friend said, oh, President will have an easier time for the next 3 weeks. I said, why? Because you will not be in the country.
Good for you.
Professor Lelyveld.
You also pointed out that we need energy transition, so we need to go to solar, you mentioned. And of course, it's been quite clear, everybody mentioned this, energy is a main, and agriculture also.
Yes.
But we also need to be practical. I think we need to take up the advice of Jeffrey Sachs. So what is happening in practice is that, for example, by the way, if you read the declaration, you'll see that it's not only talking about fossil energy, also about biofuels.
Yes.
And the reason is, I think it's quite important, is because many countries go from biofuels to fossil fuels, and then we have to convince them to get out of fossil into renewables. So, for example, if you see in India, there's a huge increase in the use of fossil fuels. So we need to come up with practical solutions to prevent people from going from bio to fossil and then try to do something else. We have to go from bio directly into renewables. So what kind of practical things that can we do? For example, I know that India has proclaimed to go into solar, but in practice I see a huge increase in fossil. So what can we do to convince people to go from biofuel, or what means can we provide to go from biofuel into renewables immediately?
I think, as we've seen from the very good example of Chile, I think they depend on what they have, like in geothermal energy and biofuel. We'll take the mixture of all of those. Unless someday we learn this technology to store electricity in the battery or in the chemicals. For example, hydrolyze and generate hydrogen and store it into some organic molecules. If we develop many, many technologies, then convert the sunshine into electricity will be very inexpensive. So place like Australia with a massive land, they could be the richest country if we have developed the technology. So we do have to go through different paths, and everything depends on biofuel, geothermal, wind power generation, and solar panel. We have to all get together. In California, you can put a solar panel, but PG&E will tell you, you can only put a small solar panel, not too big. They cannot absorb all the electricity you generate. Oh. But that's the challenge for the next 20, 30 years. The Secretary of Energy, previous Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, already said, if we spend all the money we spend on the defense and into development of renewable energy technology, we will be able to do it within 10 years. But how can we, as Jeffrey was saying, transfer the military budget into development of technology of renewable energy? That we have to do. So we ask people to be peaceful, but that we might not do.
This will take divine intervention. Professor Dasgupta.
Very briefly, there is no magic bullet, that's quite clear. But I think the talks of Professor Sachs and Raven and Dr. Lee now brought home to me something which I want to share with you very quickly, which is we economists are responsible, if anybody is, in having developed the idea of the atomistic personhood. And that has infiltrated our language even. And I think these three talks have essentially pointed to the need for recognizing that we are social animals and that we look over our shoulders to see what others are doing when we choose what to do. We're influenced by others. And I think the mass mobilization idea, which is floating around in this room, can be exploited hugely through the internet. And when large numbers of people take up a cause, as for example happened in over smoking, for example, in the West, where very quickly laws were passed which disallow smoking in public spaces. I think that kind of track is something we should be thinking about, in addition to the idea of incentives through taxation or restrictions on behavior.
Would you like to respond, Professor Lee?
I really am quite disappointed by the global collaboration. For example, at the present time, our government in Taiwan have enormous pressure from US to buy more weapons, and also force us to open the market for US agricultural products like beef and pork. And so our agriculture production is going down and down and causing lots of problems. But because we joined WTO, and so have to open the market, many fertile land are not being used. And so the international forces operating are really not ideal. Somehow we need to change.
Thank you. Professor Ki-Young.
Just the comments for your nice presentation. I think this is a very good way for the deep thinking of our global challenge and the global solution. I think we all have a very good culture for different countries. And for the Chinese culture, it's really helpful for the low carbon transition. Yes, for the philosophy for the Chinese culture is the harmonization with the social and ecosystem. And also we live better for less, and this is in Chinese 节俭生活，节俭生活。It's very traditional, but now we need to learn from our traditional Chinese culture and to make use of it. Especially for the Chinese people, as you know, they have the 20% of the global population. If it can solve and to follow the low carbon transition, it's a big contribution. So my suggestion is the global challenge, the global solution, but the local action. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
I did have lots of discussion with leaders in China over 20 some years ago, and trying to convince them it's a very densely populated area once you go to public transportation and all other things. But they all believe that you look at the US, automobile industry is the locomotive of the development of the economy. So now you have millions of cars driving all over the world, all over the places and in China. And so I raised the question of what do we mean by development? We have been following the footsteps of US for so long. And US is now not giving an ideal footstep for us to follow anymore. So we really have to think, what do we mean by development? How can we make people happy? Dalai Lama always said, happiness is the measure between reality and expectation. This is not absolute. It's the discrepancy between reality and expectation. So he believed in education. Education not only want to understand the natural world, he believed that education is to narrow the gap between reality and expectation. And that's his philosophy. And knowing the absolute value of increasing the consumption. And that's an interesting thing for us to think about.
Thank you, Professor Lee, because for this very important paper and answers. I think that we need to have a hierarchy in the solutions of the crisis, climate change and global warming. And I understand that in your paper, and especially in your answers, the first question is to change the energy, to go to the cleaner energy. And another thing that for me is important, for this challenger, we need to convince the people that this is also a good thing for the economy. Yeah. Also because we can also have some kind of money with these new jobs. That is true.
Yes.
For example, I think in my country, Argentina, you quoted Australia, but Argentina, yes. So if the government put money in this could be also very good for the economy.
Yeah. You see, if you just follow the religious belief or philosophical thinking, you said if population were to go down. In Taiwan, it's amazing. When I went back in 1994, 400,000 students enter elementary school. This year, it's only 200,000. Went down by a factor 2. The population is shrinking, except people live longer. But if we allow the population to go down, say by 2050, by a factor of 2, for example, probably it's a little ambitious. And then everybody reduce the consumption by a factor of 2. And that means that the total consumption will be smaller by a factor of 4 in the same area, same land. And then we talk about the renewable energy, then we can achieve easily. But if we keep on saying that the population should increase, consumption energy need will be increasing, then I don't think we have the solution. So we really have to accede to the fact we are overloading the earth, we have overdeveloped, and the direction of change should be different. So I don't believe that the main free car, electric car driving all over the world is called progress. I think we have to do something smarter than that.
President von Braun.
Professor Lee, I really like the slogan, back to nature, back to sunshine. If we translate that into action, it is probably a sustainable bio-based, partly solar panel-based economy. That is, I think, a great vision which needs to be translated into action fast. Following up on the point by Jos Liljefeld regarding solid biomass fuel, we may need to commit, however, that we check each and every one of our proposals. What does it mean for poor people? Solid biomass fuel is the fuel of the poorest. Primary energy in many African countries is to 60–70% biofuel based. And so I think it comes with the obligation that technology not only transfer, but the investment is mobilized to facilitate this transition, which I fully subscribe to, is not happening at the cost of the poor. So do you have any reflections on this?
Well, when we try to provide clean energy for the village and countryside or very remote area, we might have to come up with an independent carbon-free system. So the first step, we might even do this. Carl Rubia was saying, okay, you get the natural gas and heat it up to 900 degrees, will separate carbon and hydrogen. So we run the fuel cell. So during the daytime, you use the solar panel and some battery. Battery is not quite adequate yet, so accompany with a natural gas fuel cell system. And when time goes on, if we improve the battery, then things will change. For example, at the National Laboratory in the States, they said, well, in 5 years, capacity will go up by a factor 3, and cost will go down by a factor 3. That is going to be a game changer. Or if we go to hydrogen fuel cell, we start with the natural gas, but then hydrogen becomes readily available. Then we run hydrogen fuel cell. Then it's a carbon neutral system. So we might take steps to move and depend on where you are. So in many areas, you can get natural gas easily. Then I'll say supplement the solar energy and storage system with the fuel cell system, with the natural gas first, and then transition into hydrogen. This is just one of the thinking. There are many people are thinking very smart way to do it. In Greece, this wind power generator is compressing the air. It's a big tank, compressed air, and during the nighttime, use the compressed air to generate electricity. The storage system is not electricity storage, it's compressed air storage.
Virgilio, you have 1 Taiwanese minute, not a Brazilian minute.
Okay, I didn't know about the Taiwanese minute, but let me be very short. No, just a comment on this issue of solid biofuels that I think is very important because it's in declaration. And I mentioned this to Ram yesterday. And I think we should not lump together fossil fuels with solid biofuels because there are cultural differences. Indians in the Amazon use solid biofuels and there is no problem. OECD has guidelines for sustainable use of solid biomass, which is fine. So it's just a comment on the declaration and keeping it very short.
Thank you so much, Professor Lee.
Thank you.